Hello students, welcome to the world of biology through Jaguar classes. In today's class, I will continue with the chapter 7, Control and Coordination. And in this part 2, today we will focus on reflex action and reflex arc, mechanism of action of reflex action with the help of receptors, sensory neuron, relay neuron, motor neurons and effector organs, and human brain and its functions. And in human brain we will discuss about the three different parts of human brain: forebrain, that is cerebrum; midbrain, hypothalamus and pituitary; and in hindbrain, cerebellum, pons and medulla oblongata. After today's class, expected learning outcomes, which are knowledge based, with the help of which you will be able to define reflex action and reflex arc. You will also be able to explain and describe the mechanism of reflex action with the help of a flow chart. You will also be able to define receptor, effectors, sensory neuron, motor neuron and relay neuron with reference to reflex action. You will be able to explain and describe different parts of human brain and their functions. The skills which you will be able to develop after today's class: you will be able to practice your drawing skills to interpret the functions performed by different parts of our brain, and you will be also able to analyze the situations by using your analytical skills to answer certain hot questions, as well as to classify various functions performed by human according to parts of brain involved in them. Start with our today's class about the control and coordination part 2, in which we are learning our nervous system, reflex action and human brain. Now in first slide we will talk about the reflex action. There are so many actions in our body are known as reflex action. How these actions are different from other normal voluntary actions, let's try to understand about them. Reflex action is a special case of involuntary movement in voluntary organs. When a voluntary organ is in the vicinity of a sudden danger, it is immediately pulled away from the danger to save itself. And such type of actions in our body are called as reflex action. For example, when your hand touches a very hot electric iron, you move away your hand in a jerk. All of this happens in flash and your hand is saved from the imminent injury. Now, how does this reflex action take place? The path through which the impulse is going on or stimulus is moving in the form of information under this type of action, that path is known as reflex arc. It is the pathway, that's why we can define the reflex arc as it is the pathway taken by the nerve impulses and responses in a reflex action. That means from the receptor organs like skin to the spinal cord, and from spinal cord to the effector organ like our muscles. Here in this diagram you can see that how the reflex arc is maintained or formed here for a reflex action. Here the hot stimulus is received by the receptors in our skin present in our hands, which here you can say that heat or pain like stimulus are received through the receptors in our skin, and then it moves that in through the sensory neuron towards the central nervous system up to the that spinal cord. Now, instead of moving towards the brain, it will message, or we can say that that message is through the relay neuron moving towards the brain, but the action against, which is known as reaction towards this stimulus, is taken from the spinal cord itself. And relay neuron, that is the neuron here which will join these two part, and it will relay the information towards the brain, as well as it will connect this spinal cord with the motor neuron, and through that motor neuron, that a signal or in the form of message come towards the effector organ, which is a muscle attached to our hands, so that due to the muscular contraction our hands can remove from this heat stimulus, and our hand get protected against this harmful stimulus. Now I think it is clear that how does the mechanism of reflex action is going on. Now come to the next slide to learn about human brain. Human brain is a highly complex organ which is mainly composed of the nervous tissue, as we have already discussed in earlier class. The tissues are highly folded. Nervous tissues are highly folded to accommodate a large surface area in less space in our brain, and the brain is covered by three layered system of membranes which are called meninges, which are the protective covering of our brain. Cerebrospinal fluid is also one protection, which is in the form of a fluid, is filled between the meninges to protect our brain from outside jerks. The CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, provides cushion to the brain against mechanical shocks. Furthermore, the brain is housed inside the skull for optimum protection. Means our skull is also giving a third category of protection to our brain. And the human brain can be divided into three regions to understand its function: forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. In next part, we will talk about the different functions performed by different parts of human brain. Now here, to understand the different parts of human brain, or the anatomy of brain, or the structure of brain, we will see that diagram here. Human brain is shown in this diagram. This part is known as forebrain, and this whole part from here to here, this folded structure is known as forebrain or cerebrum. Cerebrum is the largest part of our brain, and this portion is known as midbrain or hypothalamus also. Here the hypothalamus gland is present, which helps in control and coordination with the help of different endocrine secretions control, that we will discuss in next class. And now come to the this backside portion of our brain, which is known as hindbrain, and in this pons, medulla, and cerebellum are the three important parts which perform the functions in the hindbrain. Now, just below the hypothalamus, there is pituitary gland also, and about hypothalamus and pituitary gland, we will talk about in endocrine system for control and coordination in next class. And here is the spinal cord, and this is the brain stem part of the brain which connects the brain to the spinal cord. Now come to know about the functions of forebrain. Forebrain, which is known as cerebrum, the main functions which are controlled by this part of our brain are thinking. It is thinking part of the brain. It controls our voluntary actions also. It stores information in the form of memory, and it receives sensory impulses from various body parts and integrates it. Means there are different types of receptors, or we can say that receptions areas in our this part to receive stimulus from the different parts of the body. Hypothalamus, which is the part of midbrain, its important functions: it controls sleep and work cycle, or we can say that circadian rhythm of the body, or it helps to maintain our biological clock. It also controls the urge for eating and drinking, or our thirst and hunger feelings are also controlled in this part of our that brain, or in this hypothalamus region. Now, the functions of midbrain we can describe here in this slide. Midbrain connects the forebrain and hindbrain, and it control motor movements, particularly movement of the eye or eyeball, and it also helps in auditory and visual processings. Functions of hindbrain, as we have already discussed in earlier slides, hindbrain has three important parts: medulla oblongata, pons, and cerebellum. Medulla part of hindbrain responsible for involuntary functions such as breathing, vomiting, sneezing, etc. And pons part of hindbrain helps in swallowing, bladder control, and facial expression, etc. And the cerebellum part of our hindbrain is responsible for voluntary actions such as posture, balance, coordination in speech, etc. Now, with that, we have already discussed about the different functions performed by different parts of brain. Now, I will end this explanation with this last slide where we are talking about two types of transmissions. Means with the help of our nervous system, there are two types of transmissions are going on through our nerves in the form of nerve impulses. One category of transmission is known as electrical transmission, and another is known as chemical transmission. Now, what is the basic difference between these two types of transmissions through our nervous or nerves network? In the electrical transmission, no need of neurotransmitter is required, while in chemical transmission, neurotransmitter is needed in between the synapse, or the junction between two neurons, or junction between a muscle and a terminal end of the neuron. In electrical transmission, there is fast mode of nerve impulse transmission, while in chemical transmission, slow mode of nerve impulse transmission is going on. And electrical transmission is taking place with the help of impulse, where impulse are directly transmitted from one neuron to another neuron without any neurotransmitter. And in case of chemical transmission, impulses are not directly transmitted from one neuron to another neuron, but it is indirectly transmitted through one neuron to another neuron through the synapse, and in between the synapse present different chemicals as neurotransmitters. With that, we have completed today's class explanation, and now try to understand these facts with the help of certain videos in the next part of the today's class. Understand the facts that we have explained about our nervous system and human brain with the help of these videos. In this video that I am playing, you will be able to understand neurons and nerve impulses, how they are helping us to note the changes in our environment.
What happens when you step out from a dark room into bright sunshine? Our involuntary actions, such as the blink reflex to bright light, as well as our voluntary actions, such as choosing to put on sunglasses, are the result of a complex and well-coordinated nervous system. At the root of it all is the nerve cell or neuron. Its primary function is communication, which is achieved via a sequence of electrical impulses. A neuron is made up of a cell body, dendrites, and an axon. Dendrites bring information into the cell body, while axons carry information away from the cell body. When information from receptor cells in our sensory organs reach dendrites, chemical changes trigger an electrical impulse in the neuron. This electrical impulse facilitates the transmission of information to other cells. It is called a nerve impulse. A nerve impulse travels in just one direction within a neuron, from the dendrites through the cell body and axon to the branched ends of the axon. From here, the impulse can be passed on to many target cells at once. What happens when an impulse reaches the end of one neuron and must move to another neuron? The junction or space between two neurons or between a neuron and a muscle is called a synapse. When information reaches the end of the axon, chemicals called neurotransmitters are released into the synapse. These neurotransmitters travel across the synapse by diffusion and trigger a new nerve impulse in the next neuron. This is how nerve impulses pass from one cell to another, creating a chain of information within a network of neurons. These impulses enable us to react to changes in our internal and external environments.
Now I think it is clear from this video that how the changes take place in our environment in the form of stimulus get conducted in the form of a nerve impulse to our nervous system, and we are responding towards these changes. Now with the another video you will be able to understand the other reflexes of our body which require us to know about our environmental changes.
Why do we shiver when it gets cold and perspire when it gets hot? These reactions are actually our body's automatic responses to the temperature change. Shivering keeps your body temperature from dropping too much. Perspiring keeps your body from getting overheated. When our body detects a change in the environment and reacts to the change automatically and without thinking, it is called a reflex. Our body's responses to internal and external changes are communicated through nerve impulses that travel through a network of neurons. Usually when cells within the body receive an external stimulus, they send a nerve impulse through the spinal cord to the brain. The brain receives the message and then sends back another message to initiate the necessary response to this stimulus. a reflex action, however, nerve impulses travel through the neurons from the site of stimulation to the spinal cord, and from there directly to the part of the body where the action is required. Reflex actions occur relatively quickly without the delay of routing signals through the brain, although the brain will also receive sensory input while the reflex action occurs.
Now I think it is clear that why the reflex action takes place in our body are more quicker than the other voluntary actions. Now see that how that reflex action is going on in our body.
In a reflex action, receptors, which are specialized cells, receive the stimulus. A sensory neuron carries the message from the receptor to the spinal cord and brain. A motor neuron carries the message from the spinal cord to the effector, or the part of your body that affects the correct response, which may be a muscle or gland. The path taken by the nerve impulse from the receptor cells to the effector is called a reflex arc. Do you know how a doctor checks your reflex when you have a problem with your knee joint? Well, he hits your knee with a hammer at a spot just below the kneecap. You respond with a knee-jerk reaction, which is an example of a reflex action. In this reflex, the stimulus is provided by the hammer hitting the tendon just below the kneecap. This causes the muscle in the front of the thigh to contract and the muscle at the back of the thigh to relax, which causes the foot to jerk upwards. Think of some other reflexes you have developed. For example, the aroma of your favorite food makes your mouth water. A nasty odor makes you nauseous. A bright light makes your pupils grow smaller, and an insect flying towards you makes you blink your eyes. Can you think of any others?
Now, these are the different types of reflex actions which are generally taking place in our body. And now I think it is clear that how the reflex action is different from the normal voluntary action. Now come to know about the nervous system or the human important part of our nervous system, that is human brain.
Let's see how we use our brains in everyday life. Here's an inside look at the brain of Vijay, a typical teenager.
Now we will see that what are the different parts of our brain and how they work.
Click each image to know which part of the brain is involved in each activity or action.
As you know that there are two important parts of our brain, forebrain, in which cerebrum, thalamus and hypothalamus comes, and in hindbrain, cerebellum, pons, medulla oblongata. These three parts are coming in this hindbrain region. Now, solving a math problem, which part of our brain is used?
Vijay uses his cerebrum to solve the maths problems.
Now is it clear that for this type of problem we are using our cerebrum part or this part of our brain. Now come to the another action, being pricked by a pin or feeling pain. In this action, which part of our brain is involved?
Vijay's thalamus receives pain impulses and conveys this information to other parts of the body.
Now try to understand in which part of our brain we are feeling thirst.
Vijay's hypothalamus regulates his thirst, hunger, sleep, and body temperature. It also regulates hormones produced by the pituitary gland.
Now, in watching a movie, which part we are using?
Vijay's midbrain is relaying processed information pertaining to sight and hearing to other parts of the brain.
And in dancing at a party, which part of brain is?
Impulse to dance originated in Vijay's cerebrum. This impulse traveled via the pons to the cerebellum. The cerebellum now coordinates Vijay's dance steps.
And pons relays sensory information between the cerebrum and the cerebellum, and in that way it associate both these parts with each other to perform complex type of actions where more than one part of the brains are involved. Now, in feeling afraid, an increase in heartbeat, how it is going on?
Vijay's heartbeat is controlled by the medulla oblongata.
Okay, I think now that is clear that from this exercise that which part of our brain is used in which of the important function. Now, with the help of this 3D, you will be able to quickly revise our central nervous system and how does our nervous system works in our control and coordination process. Once again, we will revise it.
Central nervous system. The nervous system is responsible for sending, receiving, and interpreting information from all parts of the body. It responds to external stimuli and also monitors and coordinates the functions of internal organs. The central nervous system is composed of the brain and spinal cord. Both are enclosed in protective layers called meninges. The outer layer is called the dura mater. The middle layer is called the arachnoid mater, and the inner layer is called the pia mater. The subarachnoid space, or the space between the arachnoid and the pia mater, is filled with cerebrospinal fluid. The brain. The brain is located in the cranium of the skull. It is made of three parts: the cerebrum, cerebellum, and medulla oblongata. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and is divided into left and right hemispheres. Each is composed of a frontal, temporal, parietal, and occipital lobe. The two hemispheres are connected by a nerve tract called the corpus callosum. The surface of the cerebral hemisphere is folded, which increases the surface area. The cerebrum is concerned with learning, memory, interpretation, and personality. The cerebellum is located in the back of the brain, just below the cerebrum. It controls balance, movement, and coordination. The brainstem is located beneath the cerebrum and in front of the cerebellum. It connects the brain with the spinal cord and is composed of the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. The brainstem controls a number of autonomic functions, including respiration and blood pressure. The spinal cord. The spinal cord extends from the medulla oblongata and down the back. It is protected by the vertebral column. The spinal cord is a hollow tube containing cerebrospinal fluid. 31 pairs of spinal nerves arise from the spinal cord. These nerves transmit information from body organs to the brain and from the brain to the organs. Summary. The brain and the spinal cord comprise of the central nervous system. The brain is located in the cranium. The spinal cord is located in the vertebral column.
Now I think it is clear that how our nervous system helps in control and coordination. And with that, we have finished our today's class. In next class, we will talk about the control and coordination in animals with the help of endocrine system. Have a nice day and complete your assignment on time.